Welcome, friends of humanity, to this explainer. Today, we're peeling back the gritty, violent surface of the 1999 cult classic Fight Club to reveal something honestly much deeper. We're going to uncover the psychological and philosophical roots of a story that isn't really about fighting at all. It's actually a profound look at the male psyche, the emptiness of consumer culture, and the absolutely overwhelming pressure of modern life.
Okay, let's dive into this. You know what's fascinating about Fight Club? It's that your interpretation of it completely changes as you age. When you watch it as a teenager, it feels like this cool, edgy rebellion. But when you watch it as an adult, weighed down by rent, jobs, and all those endless responsibilities, man, it hits differently. It becomes this raw mirror reflecting modern existential dread and the total illusion of the perfect life. This film takes us directly inside the mind of a protagonist who doesn't even have a name. He's simply the narrator, precisely because he represents any of us who feel lost in the modern machine. To really understand our nameless narrator, we need to look at the renowned psychoanalyst Carl Jung. Jung introduced this concept of the persona. It's essentially the artificial mask we wear to present an acceptable image to society, basically hiding our inner fragility. And our narrator? He has invested absolutely everything into his persona. He wears the crisp white shirt, the tie, he drinks the trendy branded coffee. And his job? He calculates car crash liabilities on Excel spreadsheets for a major auto company. He literally reduces human lives and fatal accidents to a financial formula just to see if the recall is cheaper than paying off grieving families. It is, quite simply, soul-crushing. So, to cope with this terrible emptiness, he tries to buy an identity. His life becomes entirely split. On the outside, he's built this flawless apartment that looks exactly like a page ripped straight out of an IKEA catalog. He painstakingly chooses dish sets, genuinely hoping they'll somehow express his unique personality. But the reality? Inside, he is suffering from a crushing emotional void and severe insomnia. He's trapped in this endless loop of working a job he hates just to buy things he doesn't need, trying to fill a hole that consumerism can never, ever actually fill. And this brilliantly illustrates the philosopher Karl Marx's theory of alienation. The narrator, like so many of the men who eventually joined Fight Club, feels like a soulless robot. He's completely separated from the meaning of his work, from the products he deals with, and ultimately from his own humanity. He's just a tiny, replaceable gear in a massive corporate machine. There's no joy of creation, no pride in his daily labor, just the numb reality of sitting in a cubicle day after day. Driven to the very edge of madness by his insomnia, the narrator finds a twisted, temporary fix. He actually starts faking terminal illnesses just so he can attend support groups for dying patients. I mean, he goes to testicular cancer groups, blood parasite groups, you name it. Why? Because hitting rock bottom with these people allows him to cry in the arms of total strangers, like a man named Bob. Immersed in their genuine suffering, the narrator finally experiences real human warmth and empathy. For a fleeting moment, he isn't alienated. And finally, he can sleep. Section 1. Marla Singer and the Suppressed Anima. But this fragile piece is shattered by a woman named Marla Singer, another tourist crashing his support groups. Now, why does her arrival trigger him so intensely? Well, we return to Carl Jung, who described the anima, the suppressed feminine side within the male unconscious. The anima governs empathy, emotion, and vulnerability. Because the narrator's upbringing and corporate life have forced him to push down all his emotions, his anima is dark, cynical, and depressed. He projects the suppressed inner self entirely onto Marla. He looks at her and literally sees a tumor, a walking reflection of his own emotional void and numbness that he desperately wants to ignore. Jung believed that true psychological health comes from acknowledging and integrating this feminine side, not running away from it. The film cleverly hints at this failure when the narrator buys a yin-yang coffee table. The yin-yang represents perfectly balancing opposing forces, right? But the narrator treats it as just another commodity. He tries to purchase psychological stability from a furniture catalog, completely missing the point that true balance is something that has to be forged within your own mind. Section 2. Tyler Durden and the Shadow. Now, what's really interesting here is the emergence of a new entity when that fragile, purchased persona is violently destroyed. Out of nowhere, the narrator's perfect IKEA apartment explodes in a mysterious fire. Left with absolutely nothing, he reaches out to a guy he just met on an airplane, the charismatic soap salesman Tyler Durden. The contrast between these two is striking. The narrator is weak, bound by corporate rules, trapped by his possessions, and basically blends right into the background. Tyler Durden, on the other hand, is a Greek god. He's charismatic, rebellious, wears loud clothes, and actively sabotages the consumerist world, like splicing inappropriate images into family films or urinating in the soup at high-end restaurants. He is the exact polar opposite of the narrator's sterile life. Tyler represents another one of Jung's core concepts, the shadow. The shadow contains all those desires, taboos, and raw instincts that society tells us are completely unacceptable. Now, Jung warned that the shadow isn't inherently evil, but if you suppress it entirely, if you constantly force yourself to be the perfect, obedient employee, the shadow grows. It builds up pressure until it becomes explosive, and eventually it takes over the steering wheel of your mind completely. And this brings us to the philosopher Carl Jaspers and his concept of the boundary situation. These are extreme moments of intense pain or near-death experiences that strip away our societal masks and force us to confront our raw existence. This is precisely why Fight Club is born. Tyler asks the narrator to punch him as hard as he can. They quickly realize that experiencing blunt, physical pain is incredibly liberating compared to the numbing psychological pain of their daily lives. Facing physical destruction is actually the only way these alienated men remember they are alive. Let's see how this builds from a simple coping mechanism into something truly terrifying. It starts as step 1, individual pain relief for the narrator and Tyler. Then, step 2, it evolves into a secret underground society where hundreds of alienated men gather to beat each other up just to feel alive. But then, things take a dark turn into step 3, Project Mayhem, a highly organized, mindless cult determined to literally destroy the global financial system. The source analysis points out a brilliant metaphor for this descent: Tyler Durden's business of making soap. Tyler steals human fat from liposuction clinic dumpsters to manufacture high-end soap. Think about that for a second. He is taking the discarded excess of a wealthy consumerist society and selling it right back to them. But soap is just a surface-level cleanser. Project Mayhem is exactly the same. It's a superficial, destructive attempt to cleanse society of its sins, but it entirely fails to change the inner core of the human beings involved. Which leads us to a massive, tragic irony. Just look at the promise versus the reality of Fight Club. The promise was individual freedom, rebellion against the corporate machine, and finally reclaiming your lost identity. But what was the reality? Once Project Mayhem starts, the men shave their heads, wear identical black clothes, and are stripped of their names. They're bound by strict rules, the most important one being, do not ask questions. In seeking freedom from society, these men voluntarily joined a cult that completely erased their individuality, turning them back into the exact soulless robots they were trying so hard to escape. Section 3. From rebellion to fascism. So how exactly did a quest for personal freedom turn into this? The psychological analysis of the film suggests that the narrator's personal shadow didn't just take over his own mind. It morphed into a collective shadow that took over the minds of the entire group. The source material uses the film as a really fascinating lens to analyze how fascist and extremist movements form in society as manifestations of this collective shadow. It happens when you have a mass of frustrated, alienated individuals who feel totally invisible. They project their suppressed anger onto a charismatic savior, in this case, Tyler Durden. To follow this savior, they willingly surrender their critical thinking. Finally, they embrace collective violence, believing that destroying the current system is the absolute only way to find meaning. They become possessed by this collective shadow, trading one prison for an even darker one. Section 4. Integration and self-acceptance. The terrifying spell of this collective shadow is only broken by tragedy. During a sabotage mission, the gentle Bob, the man the narrator used to cry with back in the support groups, is killed. The cult members show zero empathy. They simply chant, "His name is Robert Paulson," reducing his actual human life to a catchy slogan for their cause. Seeing his friend's death treated this way violently snaps the narrator back to reality. He finally sees the total horror of what his shadow has created. So, the crucial point is this. The narrator finally realizes that he and Tyler Durden are the exact same person. Tyler is just a hallucination of his own unchecked shadow. To stop the bombs from destroying the city, the narrator realizes you can't fight Tyler externally. He has to take responsibility. He puts a gun in his own mouth and pulls the trigger. By symbolically killing his own runaway shadow, Tyler disappears. Then, bleeding but alive, the narrator finally reaches out and holds Marla's hand. He is no longer projecting his disgust onto her. He is finally accepting and integrating his anima, his emotional, vulnerable side. We end with this incredibly powerful thought from Carl Jung. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. The men of Fight Club tried to solve their internal emptiness by looking outside, first through consumerism and later through fighting and terrorism. But true awakening only happens when we look inward, confront our own darkness, and balance our opposing forces. So I'll leave you with this. What parts of yourself are you hiding behind your perfect mask? And what might happen if you let that shadow drive the car? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning what's beneath the surface.